Welcome to the Sixth Sense Foundation.
Why am I doing this, and what is my name? My name is Alison Rose Jefferson, and I became a historian to tell the stories of African Americans in the Los Angeles area in particular. I need to start over.
That's all good. So yeah, my name is Khalil Gibran Stokes. I'm an American-born filmmaker, videographer, editor. I was born in Hollywood, California, Cinco de Mayo, 1974. Two young, soon-to-be professionals. My dad went to undergrad at Berkeley, then Wisconsin. So, he did his residency at DC General, and he graduated from Wisconsin and went on to become an orthopedic surgeon, board certified physician in California, and practiced for 25 years. My mom, early on, she worked with special needs children. She knew she wanted to be in child development, so that's what she went to undergrad and graduated and had her own business for 20 years, and she retired last year, and we moved her to Arizona. Me, I had a pretty cool upbringing. Went to Hillcrest Drive Elementary School, and I went to Woodbine Elementary School in Portland, Oregon for 1 year, and I graduated from 52nd Street Elementary School, and then I went to Nobel Junior High School in Northridge, California. And then I graduated and went to Hamilton High School, Alexander Hamilton High School, 2955 Robinson Boulevard, right there, West LA. Now, this is pretty cool because I had a grandmother that lived around the corner on Overland, right there on top of the hill in Woodcliff condos. And she lived there for about 20 years. So I grew up there, and I grew up in the neighborhood, and I was familiar with the area, but not really familiar with the school. So what's pretty cool about this story, when we would ditch high school, we would sometimes go to the beach just to hang out not to do anything that was mischievous, but just to kind of chill, relax, and if we were stressed out, it was a big stress reliever, and it didn't cost any money. It would just cost some time. So that's where we learned to release and chill, and once you look at that big vast body of water, you feel like whatever problems that you had were muy poquito, were very, very small. So I was always close to the beach, no matter where we lived in the city, and we moved around a lot. Every 2-3 years we lived in a different place, but up until about I was 18, I would frequent the beach, and the beach is somewhere where I would learn to think, and where I could just chill out and relax. So I always had a special connection with the beach. Now I think about it, I lost my virginity on the beach, and that was a great thing, I think. Yeah, that was cool.
For more than 50 years, Santa Monica's Belmar Triangle was a thriving African-American community until homes and businesses were seized under eminent domain to make way for the Civic Center and Auditorium. Eyewitness News reporter Adrian Alpert shows us how that early history is now being remembered.
The Santa Monica sun still shines down on Phillips Chapel Christian Methodist Episcopal Church at 4th and Bay Streets. It was the first African-American church in the Beach City, where the Reverend James Stout was the first pastor in the early 1900s.
We're reinserting the stories of the people and the places and the events of African Americans who lived in this neighborhood.
Historian Alison Jefferson has written a book titled Living the California Dream, African American Leisure Sites During the Jim Crow Era. She tells us how, from La Bonita, the earliest bathhouse, to the never-opened Ebony Beach Club, African American beachgoers were segregated despite laws here prohibiting discrimination. A visitor can learn this history and more in an outdoor exhibit just completed at historic Belmar Park at 4th and Pico, on a half-mile walk past 16 panels that tell of an African-American history nearly erased. It's here where the city of Santa Monica turned a parking lot into sports fields and dedicated the perimeter to the project.
I want people to realize that there was this African-American community here, and I want them to realize the loss, but I also want them to recognize and remember the resilience of this community as well, from the stories about the lives of the people who are represented in this exhibit.
The Belmar History Plus Art project includes a large sculpture. From a distance, artist April Banks' work looks like the form of an original home. Come closer, it's broken into pieces.
So there's, 4 parts to the house. Outside it's called the Resurrection in 4 stanzas. I wanted to capture the porch as this gathering place for neighbors and community, and porch life was really important.
There are quotes and images in the house that come alive with light and shadow. And at the heart, a time capsule, a collective memory project.
This is a resurrection of the Black history of Santa Monica, and specifically this neighborhood is where we focus for the commemoration of this history.
A few original buildings remain nearby, a reminder of what was lost.
Walking around this exhibit, folks will learn about this almost erased African American neighborhood.
So much of the history was erased because after the property was seized, it was declared unsafe and burned. The panels tell a lot about the history, but there's a symposium coming up where you can learn so much more. It's online and it's free. To sign up, log on to abc7.com.
Take 2.
4, 3, 2.
My name is Alison Rose Jefferson, and the reason that I got involved in history is because I was interested in telling the stories of African Americans, and also to talk about the landscapes and the sites that were important to African Americans throughout history. I'm particularly interested in African American history and sites in the Los Angeles and California region. I did my studies at the University of Southern California, USC, and also to get my master's in heritage conservation, and also I have a PhD that I earned in history from the University of California at Santa Barbara. And I got all of this training because I felt it was important to be able to have the tools, to have a broad base of tools in heritage conservation, or historic preservation as some people prefer to call it, so that I would be able to document different sites of African American usage that were important, significant for various reasons, and also to be able to tell the narratives of African American history that have been excluded or overlooked in the national American history narrative.
But you know Manhattan Beach. But he knows Manhattan Beach.
Oh, I unfortunately know Manhattan Beach all too well. Born and raised in San Pedro. I surf in Manhattan Beach a lot.
All right. So do you have any?
At El Porto?
Yes, ma'am. At El Porto often. Yes, I do. She knows.
I told him he would like it out there, but he said he hadn't gotten into it.
It's beautiful out there. Don't get me wrong. It is, but it's a very affluent area, and it's not from San Pedro, so it's hard for a person like me who doesn't come from wealth to go out there. You're just looked upon. I don't care what race you are. You're just looked down upon, really. People can usually tell if you come from money or not. So I usually get that stigma that comes behind it. I don't like that. I don't judge anyone color or money. I don't care who you are, what you are. There should be all equality. So when I go to places like that, I just get turned off by it. I want to separate myself from people like that.
As outrage spreads over the killing of George Floyd in the U.S., protesters have taken to the streets around the world. Thousands of demonstrators gathered in London to protest against racism and discrimination, despite calls from politicians not to defy the lockdown there because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Rarely have protests over deaths in custody drawn so many Australians. Tens of thousands rallied in Australian cities, great and small. Their focus, hundreds of Aboriginal deaths in jails and police stations in the past 30 years, with no police officer ever found guilty. Here, the death of George Floyd has suddenly created widespread anger about an Australian problem.
I've waited too long for justice to be handed down for my people, and it's time for me to make a change in the only way that people are going to listen to me, and I'm going to do it peacefully.
In Brazil, demonstrators have been raising their voices against the killing of black people, mainly in poor neighborhoods called the favelas. Figures released by the Rio de Janeiro Public Security Institute show that killings by police have increased to record levels in recent years. Hundreds marched on the city's outskirts to draw attention to what they see as Brazil's shame. Every 23 minutes in the world, a young black person dies. We have to fight because of that. If we don't fight, that will continue and we will keep dying. In Mexico, masked demonstrators vandalized buildings and threw stones at the U.S. Embassy in the capital. Protests began here on Thursday after the death of a young man in Jalisco state. He was allegedly beaten to death in a police station for not wearing a mask. Authorities have now announced the arrest of 3 officers of the man's death, but that hasn't stopped the protests. We're here in support of the great uprising of the black people and of all colors for the crime against George Floyd committed by big policemen of the United States. This movement is not just about showing outrage at the death of African-American George Floyd in the US. The Black Lives Matter movement has unleashed a wave of protests against racism worldwide. Demonstrations are continuing this weekend with protests held in East Asia and large crowds expected in European cities.
Well, first off, they wanted to gather here to show their support to U.S. protesters, but they also want this momentum to be seized not only by the government, but also for the whole population, and not just in the U.S., but also here in Germany, to do something about everyday racism, for this conversation to happen on a daily basis and for it to change things. Now, here in Berlin, a few days ago, the Berlin Senate passed an anti-discrimination law so as for people to be protected against discrimination of all kinds, for skin colors, gender, disabilities, for people to be protected against that form of discrimination. But it has to go further. For people here, it's about everyone understanding the scale of the racism still very present in all societies, and it's just about time to change that. And you can see all around me there are thousands of people who stand up next to the US protesters and who stand up because for them Black Lives Matter.
Well, I first learned about Bruce's Beach when I was looking for a paper topic during my studies at USC in the master's program for heritage conservation. And I was taking a California history class with the eminent, unfortunately deceased California historian Kevin Starr, and he's the former state librarian as well. And in the class, I told him I was interested in writing about Lake Elsinore, which had been an African American leisure site and resort community that began in the early decades of the 20th century in Riverside. The Mission Inn, of this fabulous little hotel in Riverside, and he was like, "Nah, don't write that paper on the Mission Inn. You should write on Lake Elsinore." He said he didn't know anything about that, and he thought that a lot of other people didn't know anything about it either. And the reason I was interested in potentially writing a paper about Lake Elsinore is because my family had moved to Los Angeles. My mother's family had moved to Los Angeles, my grandparents, in the mid-1920s. And my mother and her brothers were born here, and they used to go to Lake Elsinore when she was a child. And they would go for the summer. And I had heard stories about her experience of going to Lake Elsinore, to the lake, and to hanging out with family and friends there, and I was always kind of intrigued about that story or about those experiences, because when I was growing up as a child, they didn't take us on vacations like that where we would go stay overnight someplace. My parents were divorced when I was a kid, and we would go places, but we would go for day trips. So I was kind of fascinated with the idea of driving somewhere for a vacation and spending the night.
George Floyd repeatedly told the officers that he could not breathe after an officer knelt on his neck.
The family of George Floyd held a memorial in his memory.
My brother's gone, but the Floyd name still lives on.
George Floyd, you are gone but not forgotten. Because of you, we've come together.
This is for George Floyd.
My grandparents, my maternal grandparents, moved to Los Angeles like many people. They moved from Montgomery, Alabama for a better quality of life and to be free from the Jim Crow discrimination that they were experiencing in Montgomery, Alabama. So they were part of the migration out of the South to various parts of the United States to get away from all that ugly discrimination. And who knows, my grandparents might have even visited Bruce's Beach when they were just establishing themselves in Los Angeles, as it was, and this would have been the time that Bruce's Beach was being shut down through eminent domain proceedings in 1925. When I was in high school, I would sometimes visit the beach in the South Bay area because at that time I was living in Gardena, which is nearby Manhattan Beach, where Bruce's Beach is located, and I was going to Gardena High School. And when I visited the beach pier and other places around the South Bay, I always wondered if there were any African Americans who lived in the area, because I didn't generally see them walking around. I visited Manhattan Beach, but I didn't have, at that time, I didn't have any knowledge of the African American history at the time in the city. And when I learned about the history of Bruce's Beach and the eventual commemoration of the site, I thought it was a story which needed to be thoroughly documented, and that people needed to learn about, this story. The state power disenfranchisement efforts.
The efforts to right a wrong from nearly a century ago. Officials in Los Angeles County are taking steps to return scenic Manhattan Beach property that was seized from a black family. And ABC's Zoreen Shah is right there this morning. Zoreen, good morning to you.
Good morning, Dan. A family bought this land about 100 years ago for under $2 grand. They were one of Manhattan Beach's first black landowners until that land was taken away. Look, this is a massive space. We are right by the beach. By some estimates, it's worth about $75 million. Now the county is trying to right this wrong. This morning, LA County taking the first steps towards correcting a centuries-old injustice.
We will change the state law to allow the family to get their land back from LA County.
In 1912, Willa and Charles Bruce bought the first of 2 Ocean View lots for $1,225. Experts say it could now be worth up to $75 million.
This was an injustice inflicted not just upon Willa and Charles Bruce, but generations of their descendants who almost certainly would have been millionaires.
County Supervisor Janice Hahn, an LA County native, saying she hadn't heard of the Bruces until Black Lives Matter activists protested at Bruce's Beach last summer. The Bruces, among the city's first black landowners. They created a beach resort for their community who were barred from local beaches due to segregation.
Bruce's Beach became a lively and flourishing resort.
Anthony Bruce is one of the last living descendants of Willa and Charles Bruce.
I did hear about this growing up.
For years, Willa, Charles, and their guests were targets of relentless racist attacks and harassment from white neighbors and the KKK.
That's why we moved away, but we didn't move away willingly. And that land was stolen from us because we would be millionaires today. If there's generational wealth that can be transferred or inherited, then there should be also generational debt that should be incurred and taken care of too.
In 1929, the city took the Bruce's property by eminent domain, citing the urgent need for a public park. But for decades, it sat empty. Today, LA County's lifeguard training headquarters sits on the Bruce's property.
I want people to take away from this that there is justice and that you have to pursue it. And your family can find peace for some of the wrongs that were committed against them in the past.
And there's still a lot of bumps on the road. One relative reportedly upset because the city has not formally apologized. Another anonymous group opposes the transfer, saying it's only happening because Manhattan Beach is falsely being accused of being a racist city. Dan?
Quite a story. Zoreen, thank you very much.
I want you to simply describe why you got to Manhattan Beach And what made you stay? What made you fall in love with not only the beach, but this beach? And if you can tell me a little bit about Bruce's beach and what kind of adversities you might have transpired because of simply the color of your skin or who you are, or these people not knowing who you are. I know who you are just because when I moved here, you was one of the first people who walked up to us and introduced yourself. You wasn't scared. You let us know instantly we was
neighbors.
Right. So
that's it. We're neighbors.
Well, who did that to you to let you know that it was cool for you to be here, not just the
Dorothy?
Okay. All right. Talk about it. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. That's
Dorothy. When I met Dorothy downtown at the nightclub, and I was still married, and I told her, I said, "Now look, I'm getting a divorce. Me and my wife is in the midst of a divorce. You know, I was sleeping in one room, she sleeping in another. The kids was all, you know. So after I got tired of that, I went on over and rented me a Section 8 apartment. Because I had the 50-gallon drum hit me in 72. So I was off for about 5 or 6 years. Bad back. Rehabilitation. Yeah, I'll use that term. I went from $12 an hour in the 70s to $2.10 an hour as a security guard. Couldn't handle that. So, and then after me and Dorothy met, got to fooling around, she told me, you know, that she wasn't looking for no husband, and she didn't want no babies. That's, oh Lord have mercy. That's the best thing that ever happened to me. A woman don't want no baby, and don't want no husband, but I damn sure don't want no wife. And so, yeah, and she was single, you know, and wealthy, you know.
Dorothy, D-O-R-O-T-H-Y, O'Neill, O''N-E-I-L. I've lived here in Manhattan Beach since 1974, and I love that the history of Bruce Beach is written out in a plaque at Bruce's Beach Park, and it was donated by the class of Miracosta 5 or 6 years ago. They didn't want history to repeat itself, so the story in its entirety is on the plaque.
That's it?
That's it. That's it.
All right. Anything else to add? Do you have any other information? Anything else about Manhattan Beach? Do you love living here?
I love living here. I love that we have diversity on the city council. Mitch Ward is an African-American male who's been on the board and who has served as mayor. And I think it's a great place. There's diversity now that wasn't here in '74, and everybody's welcome. A few years ago we had an African-American couple that had a burning cross on their yard, and the whole town came together to say, we won't accept this. The family was going to move away, and they said, no, you're valuable to the community, and this doesn't represent Manhattan Beach. And the family stayed and have continued to be welcomed.
And I also learned about another leisure site. Bruce's Beach was in Manhattan Beach. And then I also learned about another leisure site that was in Santa Monica near Bay Street that was sometimes called the Inkwell. And then another one which was the Park Ridge Country Club that African Americans bought from white people in Corona in Riverside. And another one called Valverde, which is near Santa Clarita in northern Los Angeles County. And so at that time, when I was taking this class with Kevin Starr, I wrote a short paper.
Now back in the 30s, I think it was a black family bought that whole stretch from wherever they could all the way to the top of Rosecrans, Hahn. Yeah. And back in that day, things were spread. These was empty lots. All this shit was empty. And they just jumped in there and bought and put them a little old shanty up on it like the one across the street. But they didn't want nothing black in Manhattan Beach, so they went down there, killed the folks, burned out the house.
The developers, Willa and Charles Bruce were the developers of what was originally called Bruce's Lodge, which was founded in 1912 in Manhattan Beach. And it was originally a couple of pop-up tents on the beach where they had space for people to change their clothes, and then they sold beverages and snacks. And then later they built a couple of structures, one fairly large structure that had a meeting hall, dance hall kind of place, and seating for a restaurant, and then rooms for people to stay overnight. It was quite amazing for some people opening this place in 1912 because it was mentioned in the Los Angeles Times. Although I grew up in Los Angeles, most of the history that I learned about the Afro-Angelino experience came from what I learned from my mother and her family, not history that I read in books. And my mom, Marcelin, and her two brothers, Prince and Price, they were born here, as I said, and her parents, Peter and Rosa Cobbs, moved to the region in the 1920s. And my maternal grandfather was a medical doctor, and my maternal grandmother was a teacher before coming to Los Angeles, where here in Los Angeles she took care of her children and supported her husband and participated in various clubs and civic activities.
And got it to the point where you couldn't take it because the people is dead. They can't build nothing on it. You go back to the state as a park. And so that's how I got there. That's what they said. I don't know. It was for my time. But I find that the people with all their money, they're very, very cagey. Very cagey. And we knew each other because when I would cook gumbo at the first of the year, everybody was invited. And matter of fact, they don't know their neighbor. They don't know their neighbor. They don't go over and introduce themselves to people that next door. See, we used to have a neighborhood watch thing. 2 buildings down from where you were was the head of neighborhood watch. Okay, she's down close enough to the Strand. I'm up right in the middle of the street. Hey, we know what's going on.
From the beginning, were not necessarily hospitable to the Bruce's resort. But they couldn't do too much about it other than rope off the beach to keep them from accessing what they considered private property right before the mean tide line of the water. So when you're talking about what private and public property is at the beach, mean tide line is kind of hard to where the tide line is and what would be public and what would be private beach. Even though they were having these troubles with the folks putting ropes up to keep them off the beach and having constables down there, and those would have been volunteer constables in Manhattan Beach in 1912. The people still enjoyed themselves out there on the beach, and the Bruce's resort thrived. Mrs. Willa Bruce was the primary person who was in charge of running the establishment. Her husband, Charles, worked on the trains, and so he was around, but he wasn't around. And they also owned a home in Los Angeles, and her son helped with the resort. So by 1918, they had the first of their larger structure that's was Bruce's Lodge, and there are a few pictures of that around. And then they added a few other structures there by the early 1920s.
They would all come up. Then when I could do my barbecuing during the summer, I'd have the police department. I'd have, hey, stop by and get them a plate. Yeah, right. But once they annexed us into Manhattan Beach, they got they clamped down. You know, they're not as friendly. See, when this was county, they had one cop sit down there every day and every night at the gas station. Yeah, it was simple. And there was more bars on the street. There was the Pelican, and what was this one over here? What that store is? It was a big one. The El Porto Market, it was a big restaurant there. And you got El Porto Market, or El Porto across the street. But you in Manhattan Beach, this was El Porto. You right on the corner there was one of the baddest liquor stores you ever seen in your life. Had under the bottom was storage. And most of the people in the area, when they ran out, they would call Stan's Liquor and get 2 or 3 cases from Stan. Oh, he was sort of a, you know, spin section right there. Well, Stan was all right, too.
When I was 5 years old, we used to go to the beach house to play all the time to get in the water in Manhattan Beach. But this beach house was right across the street from Brewster's place that was burned down, and I asked my grandfather, how come I'm playing in the sand across the street with a bunch of charcoal? He said the Ku Klux Klan had burned the place down. And I said, well, how come they didn't burn yours down? He said, I sat on the front porch with a shotgun.
This life's a commodity. More than just some hyped up, blinged out urban style, then watered down cultural oddity. You ready for the robbery? Can you keep from sobbing when a nigga got that tool y'all think so cool about to get hot right in front of your noggin? I already know the product. You already know you caught up. But you all better know that the higher the climb to the top, the harder the fall to the bottom. With every wrong's another chance to get hung. Dealing with the dung cause you wanna be a dun and shine like the sun. Money is a cancer. But most folks think it's the answer. That's why you can't be scared to do you. Show these niggas a new you, or bust their head with the old one. Suck this up like a cold. This alert is a cold one. I ain't selling you no bull, cause for 10 years I rode one. Get all the bread you can.
So, you figure out of the 41 years I've been here, I've been arrested twice. I've been stopped by the cops 6 times. 3 times was for no registration on my car. And the sticker was on the back. I told him he didn't have to stop me and turn on all them lights and sirens and shit if he wanted to meet me, because I know damn well that sticker is on the back of that truck. Yeah. It is changed. But then, one morning, somebody was breaking in a car down in the garage next door. And the cops came over here with their little flashlight and their dog and drug a little Mexican boy out from under my truck. I said, damn, what are you doing that for? I mean, they was all over this place.
When was that?
Oh, 80 and 90, right in there.
Damn.
But you see, if they can get through El Segundo, they can run all over Manhattan Beach, El Porto. But you can't hardly get through El Segundo. Because El Segundo, he starts over there at Grand, and he got the El Segundo Park Beach right in front of the power plant. Yeah. That's a cold-blooded set over there too. They got a whole bunch of little Mexicans running there. Yeah, and white boys sitting up in the office. Yeah, they tough.
Other than good times from 1912 to the early 1920s, the white people at that point may have been continuing to harass them, but it just didn't make the paper, either the African American community paper or the LA Times or the Manhattan Beach paper, because the white people were too busy trying to build their town. Because at the time that the Bruces were starting their resort, it was around the same time that Manhattan Beach became a city. And the land where their resort was situated was in what was called Central Manhattan Beach at that time, and the developer of that area was George Peck. And George Peck owned property also in San Pedro and other places in LA, in Los Angeles County. So there in Manhattan Beach, the Bruces had a nice business until the early 1920s. Also, they had arrived here like other African Americans from other places. They had been living in New Mexico before they came to California with their son and his daughter. And the son also, Harvey, helped out with the business. The Bruce's Lodge was becoming there were becoming too many African Americans in that area, and they said there was these local whites decided there was a Negro invasion that was going on in Manhattan Beach, and they decided that to do something about it to stop black people from continuing to come to Manhattan Beach and enjoying themselves for the day activities or building small cottages there, because that's what people did in terms of the time. They weren't building houses the way we think of them today. They were really more like cottages that were like cabins. Is about future value as well. In Los Angeles County and Southern California in general, people buy property to live in it, to invest in it, and to make money on it. And so I'm sure that if the Bruces still own that property today, or if somebody in their family still owned it, they would be sitting real pretty right now. That's multi-million-dollar property now. So although the Bruces fought, and the other African Americans fought to keep their property, they were unable to, and they eventually negotiated with the city of Manhattan Beach. And so in 1925 they raised the property pretty soon after the eminent domain proceedings were passed, and African Americans still continued to come down to the beach on some occasions because there were still some families that lived down there who were African American, but they didn't live in the section. They didn't live in the blocks of property that was taken through eminent domain, or they didn't have property, vacation property. It wasn't that they were living there year round. They were living there. They had the cottages for vacation use. So and so the land was vacant. African Americans kind of stopped going there because there were no facilities really for them to utilize unless they knew the few families that were still there. And it was inconvenient to go there. If somebody's going to be nasty to you all the time when you come down to the beach and you can't park your car and you can't change your clothes, it's like there's no reason to go where you're not wanted. And also there was Ku Klux Klan activity in the area during the 1920s, and there was a threat at one point in time that had been made against, there were actually more than one, there were several threats that were made to some of the African American families that were there, including the Bruces. At one point somebody lit a mattress up under one of their properties, and the police or the fire department came and put it out. And then at another point, someone burned a cross on somebody's lawn. It wasn't the Bruces, but one of the other the African American community members with property down there. And then there were some phone calls also that occurred to the Bruces before they vacated their property, threatening them, and it was thought that it was the Ku Klux Klan that was doing that. Well, there were rallies that were advertised in the newspaper in the South Bay community. There were Ku Klux Klan rallies that were advertised in the newspapers in the South Bay region. Another factor in terms of the development of the region was when the freeways came in, because then that made it easier for people from other parts of the region to go there for employment, and then it made it easier for them, if they're building down there, for people to be able to get from there to other parts of the county for work as well. So with that development that began to occur, African Americans were not necessarily welcomed to live there, and there were incidents even in the 1960s when housing discrimination occurred, and it was written about in the newspapers. So even with the laws that were passed starting in the 1940s, saying that you couldn't have covenants restricting African Americans and people of color from buying property in certain areas, and then the fair housing laws that came in the 60s that said you can't discriminate against people to rent to them. You can't discriminate in renting to people. African Americans were still having issues in terms of housing. In more contemporary times, now you can't get in there because of economics. Pretty much anybody that wants to live down there, if you got the money, you can live down there. But those are multi-million-dollar homes now, and so with that means that it's more difficult for middle-class people of all stripes to be able to buy a home there. And even recently, in the last couple of years, there was vandalism of an African American couple's home. She's a lawyer and he's a pharmacist, and the husband was home, the wife was traveling, and he was home with his 2 children, and somebody threw a tire full of gasoline through their front window of their house, and it landed in their foyer. So even though times have changed in certain ways, in terms of more access, there's still some nasty people out there who have problems with African Americans and people of color in Manhattan Beach, who had been dispossessed of their land in the 1920s. There were a couple of years of activities that went on, public process that went on with this, and it finally happened that they changed the name of the park to Bruce's Beach in 2007. And with that change of name, some people believe that it only occurred because at that particular time there happened to be an African American who was on the city council who became mayor during that time, and they feel that he helped to encourage his fellow council members and the city of Manhattan Beach residents to change the name. They felt that the citizens actually were the ones that brought it to the council, that they wanted the name changed. And many citizens feel like if he hadn't been on the council at the time to help sway the council, and this council member turned mayor at that time, his name was Mitch Ward. He went to USC too. And he originally is from Arkansas. So some people feel that if he hadn't marshaled the council, that the name wouldn't have changed. So now the name of the park is Bruce's Beach. It recognizes that the African Americans were dispossessed with some crazy language. It doesn't recognize they have a plaque, and the plaque recognizes that the African Americans were dispossessed, but it does it in a kind of unsatisfying way, and it doesn't recognize the civil disobedience, the peaceful civil disobedience that went on at that time in 1927 to clarify beach access, and that was a big deal when it happened in 1927 because it was one of the first it was the first civil disobedience protest, is what civil disobedience means, that African Americans in Los Angeles had public protest. It was the first public protest that African Americans in Los Angeles and the Southern California region participated in. And it was such a big deal in 1927 that the NAACP sent out, the national body of the NAACP sent out a press release to all of its branches around the country to tell them of the wade-in that had happened in Los Angeles or in Manhattan Beach and the success of that venture. So bringing it back up to today, in terms of where we are, the city in 2018, the park is now called Bruce's Beach. They changed the plaque so that it reflects that, and that's all the city has done. There's no real other efforts to recognize the events that took place at that location. I'm the only one that has written about the whole history of the site from 1912 to more contemporary times, and that was first a chapter in my dissertation, and it's available to people that are in academia, and it will be available to the general public very soon on University of Nebraska Press. So hopefully when that story gets out to a broader audience from the book that I will have out, there'll be more people that learn about the story, and hopefully it will encourage some other recognition activities, public programs that go on down in Manhattan Beach. And also, hopefully, in terms of this story, it will encourage other people to learn about other stories of African American history in Southern California. Some of the people that I learned about in terms of the Bruce's Beach story, they're fascinating characters. I say characters in the broadest sense of the word, but they were people who migrated to Los Angeles because they were looking for a better life. And they bought the California dream narrative just like everybody else who was moving out here. And they came with a little money. There wasn't a lot of industry here at the early part of the 20th century, but they made their way. And they lived their California dreams down there in Manhattan Beach and in other places in California because of the fact that the discrimination here wasn't as virulent.
It's all right to be angry, but we're going to take our anger and our indignation and turn it into energy. George Floyd! George Floyd! Justice!
To march. To dance. To kneel. To be quiet. We're saying your name. We're saying their names.
Say her name! Say her name!
We're being loud.
Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot!
We're being brave. We're laughing. We're crying. We're getting engaged. We're getting married. We're changing the world.
We soldiers, man. Let's stop hurting each other and let's get it right, man. Today is the day we're gonna stand up for our community, man.
If we could do this, we could do more. We just gotta continue on pushing and don't give up.
He did what?
That changed the world.
Daddy changed the world.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. I'm Supervisor Janice Hahn, and this is how this is going to go. We're not going to have an MC introducing all the speakers. The speakers will introduce themselves, or the person who's speaking will introduce the next person. So we're going to cut down on the introductions and just get to the main point of this story. This is a story of an American dream that turned into a nightmare. But hopefully, all of us here can begin to right a wrong that happened 100 years ago, right here where we're standing. In 1912, in Manhattan Beach, Willa and Charles Bruce purchased 2 parcels of beachfront property right here. This was in the era of Jim Crow and segregation, and black people were not welcome at most other beaches, which is why Willa, as a black woman, wanted to purchase her own property right here. Willa Bruce is quoted in a 1912 story in the Los Angeles Times as saying, "Wherever we have tried to buy land for a beach resort, we have been refused. But I own this land and I'm going to keep it." She went on to build a resort with a dance hall, a lodge, a cafe. It had 2 dressing tents and bathing suits for rent. It was known as Bruce's Lodge and subsequently became known as Bruce's Beach. Bruce's Beach became a place where black families traveled from far and wide to be able to enjoy the simple pleasure of a day at the beach, like so many of us take for granted. As Rosanna Shaw from the Los Angeles Times wrote, Bruce's Beach provided black families a way to bask in their own slice of the California dream. But white neighbors resented the black beachgoers and the popularity of this resort. They harassed the people at Bruce's Beach, and they staked off the Strand right here in front of the lodge with no trespassing signs and forced the people to walk 1.5 miles from the resort just to get to the ocean. They slashed people's tires. The KKK even attempted to set the Bruce Lodge on fire and succeeded in burning down a local black family's home near this property. When those scare tactics didn't drive black residents out of town, the city took matters into their own hands. Manhattan Beach officials declared eminent domain to take the Bruce's family property in 1924, claiming there was an urgent need to build a public park. The Bruces fought in court to keep the property, but in 1929, the city seized it. Willa and Charles Bruce were paid only a fraction of what they asked for and said they were denied the ability to buy beachfront property elsewhere so they could have a chance to start over. In what must have felt like salt in their wounds, the city allowed the land to remain vacant for decades. As one of the descendants said, they used the law to commit a crime. The Bruces had their California dream stolen from them. And this was an injustice inflicted not just upon Willa and Charles Bruce, but generations of their descendants who almost certainly would have been millionaires if they had been able to keep this property and their successful business. In 1948, the city transferred the Bruce's land to the state of California. And in 1995, this land was transferred back to the county of Los Angeles so the county could assume operations and maintenance of the beach. And now LA County's lifeguard training headquarters sits directly on top of the property that was once the Bruce Lodge. I'm embarrassed to say that I knew very little about this history. I grew up in Los Angeles County. I grew up hearing about the stories of racism and violence against African Americans in the South. And somehow I thought that didn't happen here. But in fact, it did. And Kavon Ward, who is here with us today, raised this issue, has been raising this issue to the public's eye, and I finally understood. And when I realized that the county of Los Angeles now had ownership of the Bruce's original property, I wanted to do what I could to start righting this wrong. I felt there was nothing else to do but to give the property back to the direct descendants of Willa and Charles Bruce. And that is what I am announcing today, that it is the county's intention to return this property. And as I have been talking about this lately, I've heard from so many of you who also think that is the right thing to do, is to return this property. And they wanted to be part of making this right. Today we brought a coalition together of local leaders committed to getting this done. I'm so grateful to have her here today and to have the support of one of my colleagues on the County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Holly Mitchell. But I learned very quickly that I just can't give the property back. There's one little thing in this. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce the great Senator Steve Bradford.
Thank you, Supervisor Hahn. Let's give her a round of applause. A true profile and courage. There comes a time when one must ask a position that is neither, or one must take a position that's neither safe, nor politic, nor popular. He must take it because his conscience tells him it's the right thing to do. That's why we're here today. That's a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. Good morning. My name is Steve Bradford, and I'm the senator from the 35th Senate District, just a little east of here. And I'm the chair of the Legislative Black Caucus, and I'm also the appointee to the new formed State Reparations Task Force that starts this year. I am the author of SB. Earlier this week, the City of Manhattan Beach City Council adopted a statement of acknowledgement condemning the history of the Bruce's Beach. But I say it was tepid at best. It was far from a full-throated apology that this community, this state, and this nation deserves. With the support of Supervisor Hahn and Supervisor Holly Mitchell, I look forward to working with the county to get this legislation signed into law this year. I also want to thank my fellow legislators who are the co-authors. Senator Ben Allen has stated, Assemblywoman Autumn Burke, who can join us, and Assemblymember Al.
What would compel a group of people to stop another group of people from enjoying Mother Nature, the sand and the ocean? If I were standing next to you in the ocean, my blackness wouldn't impact you. And so what would compel a group of people to suggest it appropriate that another group of people have to walk 1.5 miles to enter something that none of us own, the ocean and sand? Imagine the kind of fear and hatred that will compel a group of people to think it appropriate to invoke fear and hatred and violence and use the laws available to them at that point in time to steal that land from a group of people who purchased it with their own. I miss my colleagues in the state legislature, so it gives me pride to introduce your assemblyman representing the 66th Assembly District, Assemblyman Al Marsucci.
Good morning, everyone. As the South Bay Assembly member representing Manhattan Beach, I am proud to join this group of leaders on this podium here today to right this wrong that was committed 100 years ago against Willa and Charles Bruce, as well as the other black families that own properties right here in this neighborhood over 100 years ago. As a co-author of SB 796, we will be fighting for a measure of justice for the descendants of the Bruce family. You know, it's hard to believe that this beautiful beach was just one of 2 so-called black beaches in Los Angeles County 100 years ago. And what makes this all the more important was that, as Supervisor Hahn stated earlier, this was their piece of the California dream. They owned this beautiful land. They owned this beautiful view. And today, we are here to restore that land to the Bruce family. I say, first of all, as a representative of Manhattan Beach, as a South Bay resident for 25 years, that I know that Manhattan Beach is not a racist city. I know that there are good people like Mayor Pro Tem Hildy Stern, that was fighting for an apology from the city of Manhattan Beach to the Bruce family for what happened 100 years ago. I know. And so I want to give a special thank you to Supervisor Hahn for leading this effort, because without your leadership, this would not be happening. Thank you very much. I would now like to turn to representing the Bruce family, Chief Dwayne Shepard.
Thank you, Assemblyman Marisucci. You all have heard a lot from me over the past year. We all know the story of the Bruce family. We already know the shenanigans of the Manhattan Beach City Council. My family asked me to tell the City Council that when you go low, we stand toe-to-toe. We will not tolerate the insults that are coming from your council. And we highly suggest that you start revising your budget very soon. My name is Chief Dwayne Yellowfeather, the designated representative for Charles and Willa Bruce. For those who don't know, Willie was the name that her mother's slave master gave to her. She threw off that name and decided to be called Willa. A grown woman, a grown consenting woman. And here we have someone on the city council decides to call her by that slave name. A slap in the face to the memory of our matriarch. Then they issue an acknowledgement and say in that acknowledgement that the events that happened, the terrorism that happened to my family was reportedly done. The facts are ostensible. And people say, I'm angry, I'm strident. Yeah, I am. I am the generation that Charles and Willa Bruce prayed for. And we're going to stay here until the job is done. We want restoration of our land, restitution for the loss of enterprise, and punitive damages for the collusion of the institutional racists in this city that railroaded our family. I would first and foremost like to thank God for the people he has sent to help us in our quest for justice. The Bruce family diaspora as a whole around this country who are still trying to achieve their familial connections because of the scourge of slavery. I'd like to thank Kavon Ward, one of our avenging angels, for her unselfish sacrifice to our cause for the past year at great peril to her life and well-being as a resident, or I should say of the 0.5% resident of Manhattan Beach. Janice Hahn, who through civility and humanity realized that an injustice and a violation of the human rights of innocent Americans has occurred and has courageously stepped up and spoke out on behalf of her fellow human beings, regardless of race, creed, or color, and have stood on the right side of history and the legacy of her father, Supervisor Kenneth Hahn. She's walked the talk, she's inspired. The Bruce family is grateful for your efforts and pray that God guides you and rewards you for your efforts. I would also like to thank Senator Steve Bradford, Assemblyman Al Marisucci, Supervisor Holly Mitchell, and you, the international media, and and all the others who have unselfishly supported our cause. We reserve our rights on this earth to be men, to be women, to be human beings, to be given the rights of human beings, to be given the respect of human beings in this country, in this day, and in this society, and in this damn city. And we intend to bring it into existence by every means necessary. Thank you. I'd like to now bring up Fire Chief Darrell Oscar.
We will get justice here in the city of Manhattan Beach. Stand by. But overall, we're here to honor Willa and Charles Bruce. You know, I can just kind of feel Willa right here, right now. You know, she said, "This is my land." You know, and I'm going to keep it. You know, we're going to make sure that her descendants do keep this land. I've been here for over 30 years, more than half of my adult life. And 17 of those years, I've given back to this community as a mayor, council member, commissioner. And it was about standing up for the people that were considered the least amongst us. The seniors who couldn't afford to stay in their homes when utilities were wanting to go underground and the cost was going to run them out of the city. I'm like, no, I'm standing up for them. And when my friend Bob Brigham came to me when I first moved here in this town 30 years ago and told me about him riding across the street up there on the bus with his mom and said, "Mom, why is that place overgrown with grass?" And the mother said, "Shh, we don't talk about that here." Well, when I became mayor, I said, you know what? I'm going to talk about it because I want the world to know what we had here in the city of Manhattan Beach in 1912. An entrepreneur, a black woman, that said, I have the money, I want the land, and it thrived. People from all over Los Angeles County came here to this beach because they couldn't go anywhere else to enjoy the Pacific Ocean freely. We must never, ever forget that. So I am so grateful that all of you are here today. Just make sure that you support Supervisor Hahn, the senator, the assembly member, to make sure the right thing is done and this land is returned back to the Bruce family. Thank you very much.
Please welcome Kevon Ward, who literally has been raising the issue of Bruce's Beach for a while now and started Justice for Bruce's Beach. And it was people like me who finally got it. And thank you for being way ahead of us on this one. Please welcome Kevon Ward.
Thank you so much. Justice for Bruce's Beach. Thank you to the movement, to the people. Thank you. Power to the people. You know, as Alicia Garza so eloquently states in her book, The Purpose of Power, movements do not have official moments when they start and end. And there's never just one person who initiates them. Movements are like waves, like the waves crashing against the shore here at Manhattan Beach. They ebb and flow, they are perpetual, their direction dependent upon the conditions that surround them and the barriers that obstruct them. We inherit movements. I inherited this movement on Juneteenth of 2020 when I realized that the history on that plaque was inaccurate and incomplete. And while my initial thought was to have the plaque demolished, death to that big slab of concrete, Source moved me to demand that the land be given back to the Bruce family. I have to give recognition to the chief. He's been researching and seeking justice silently, sharpening his irons since before they renamed the park Bruce's Beach. And as I play my part in this movement, my ancestors, they travel with me. They speak through me as I chant justice for Bruce's Beach.
Yeah, and all the changes, and actually see the houses when when you describe them, and
now,
then
you take that house over there, not this one, the next one over, Kiesler, Hal Kiesler owned that, and another one down there, and he owns the local yoke. Him and his man friend, yeah. His man friend died, I think. And he sold off a lot of things. But you come back in a month, take a picture of that, that'll be all up. Okay, see that house right there, the 208?
right.
That used to look like that brown house down there. Just smaller, okay? And the one right next to where they doing the construction, it used to be another one small like that. And where she going, it was small. And this one here is an old family. Now the guy who folks built that place, his name was Buzz and Sylvia. They owned a lot of property. Buzz, he wrote the 20 Mule Team Borex. That was back in the day when TV was all in black and white. He wrote that. Man, see that little building up there? Next to the big green one? Going down. Most of all of these buildings was like that when we first moved in here. And okay, them 4 buildings down on that end. 4 buildings on the end. That was vacant lots in there. It was vacant lots. Yeah. And most of everything was like the little house next to the one you used to live in. And the man that built your house that you used to live in was old man Rosecrans.
Ma'am, I understand how you feel. Come on. But if the Bruce family didn't love Manhattan Beach, we wouldn't want to come back here. We love it just as much as you do. And I want to say that $14,125 that they gave in judgment to our family in 1924, the family, after it was railroaded out of town, didn't receive that money until 1927. So they left here destitute. And so therefore, what these people have done to my family needs to be rectified by every means that we can have them do it. And they should want to apologize shows maturity. And there's a lack of maturity in this city right now. People in Manhattan Beach need to have recall.
All right, thank you. So don't bring him back. Don't bring that little fucker back. Then when I go up to Utah, he don't know how to act now. Yeah. I tell him, I said, just be yourself. I said, because you're big, you still don't scare nobody.
Right.
I said, you just big old kid. Oh, he's a superstar. And I told him, I said, you gotta get your grades or you ain't gonna do shit. Okay, Mr. Rosecrans, in the house that you used to live in, he built that house. And that's what the street, Rosecrans Street's named after that, after him. But he was a big thing over here back in the day when they was hauling off, taking train cars, building houses over in El Segundo. There was a lot of houses built off train boxcars. Just sit down. Yeah. Okay, now you take when the boys hauled off and realized that me and Dorothy was gonna be an item anyway, and we were gonna travel and go have fun. They kind of wanted to stay, but they was gonna have to deal with me and Dorothy. In other words, grades. That was gonna be a problem. That's pulling up. There you go. The grades.
Okay.
So they wasn't too up on wanting to go to school.
Right.
So we messed around here, and I'd bring them out, and then when the sun go down, we would go on bike rides at night. And me and the baby boy. See, Rodney was my redhead mulatto. He had red hair and he was real bright. And we would go bike riding at night. Me and Quentin, you couldn't see me and Quentin. All you could see was Rodney riding in the middle of two black spots. We'd had fun too. We had fun down there on the street. Yeah, we ride down to the park. And just as we get to the park, we turn around because there's too many lights. Yeah, we had fun. And most of the buildings over on the other side of the street they were like the old one that used to be Mary's place. There was 4 of them over there across the street from where you used to live. Mm-hmm. There was 4 of them over there, and that one in the middle there with the upstairs and the parking under the banner, with the deck on top. Okay, now that was all just the front. Coming out of there,
yeah.
See that gate down there? Where the traffic's coming through? That was blocked off. You couldn't come out through there.
Right.
And they wanted to put more meters in there, so they had to open it up.
Right.
And you couldn't, you would go in, down there, and turn around, go back out the same way. Now, they got a bridge, a piece on the Strand that goes right up to Rosecrans, okay? But they built the Strand over it and down instead of putting an exit there to come out. We tried to get them to do that, but they said it'd be too expensive. Yeah. That's the reason we get so much noise and they get so much filth. You're gonna get filth off of the airplanes that's shooting out there. You know, exhaust. Then you get the car exhaust. So it's not as clean as everybody think it is. Man, living at the beach, it's like this, cool all the time, which is good. And when it's hot, it's still cool. But everybody else will be burning up anyway. See?
All right, how high can he go?
32 feet. He can't go no higher than 32 feet.
Why not?
Yeah, well, that's the law. Ain't nothing around here higher than 32 feet above ground.
And then you're just obstructing view.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So that's basically the way it is. And you would be surprised how the police department act when they know who you are. Now they know damn well who I am, and they know I got guns. Okay? You let somebody all off and use the term gun. It'll be cops all around me. That man over there across the street, he's a white boy. He got an automatic long gun. Okay? Yeah. He runs the Arizona pretty regular. See, we can do that in Arizona. We can't do that here. And it's like this all the time. This time of day, everybody want to see the ocean. Mm-hmm. And they ain't supposed to come out through there. You're supposed to turn either way. Here come your neighbor.
Oh, Kim?
Yeah. Doing that damn little noise there. Okay, now, in 1972, the one bedroom downstairs, now this is a duplex. It's 2 bedroom, 1 bath upstairs. It's a 1 bedroom, bath, kitchen, and living area downstairs. Now, back in the early 70s, that rent was $325 a month. The mortgage was $350. The building went for $65,000. That was the whole building. So $350 or $325 was the mortgage. You see? So, but now today's date, now in 2000, that down there is $2250. And the mortgage has been refinanced, so the mortgage is only $500 and some dollars out of my pocket, along with his, yeah. Because you're sitting there, what happened is when you hauled off and got annexed in the Manhattan Beach, your taxes went up, so your rent had to go up. So now when you use up a certain amount of money, you just refinance. You'll never use up $1.7 million, $1.8 million. You'll never use that much. So you refinance. Got back then. That tenant's gonna always pay for the mortgage. Yeah, that's the way it's. But you got to give him the same thing you got. A comfortable, clean, neat place to live. And thank you for running me down. I appreciate it. And I hope that you two get this together.
Thank you for having me. This that good game with Mr. Bates. He just told you some game. He just saved you some game. Just so you know, you can thank him, not me. He's the one giving it to you. Boom, boom. And don't worry, we'll finish it up. You talking about Allison?
They'll never forget the man behind the camera.
Oh man, please.
It wouldn't be a show without the man behind the camera.
We thank the man in front of the camera, man. It's a teamwork to make the dream work, baby. You know.
It wasn't no hell of a lot of teamwork. It just worked. We just finally got it to work.
That's right. That's
and
right.
you're welcome to come back anytime.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you for having me, man.
Oh yeah, well that was good. Black.
Oxygen for sale, oxygen for sale. Welcome to the Sixth Sense Foundation. Oxygen billing simul complete. Welcome to the Sixth Sense Foundation. Hashtag video robot.
Welcome to the Sixth Sense Foundation.